David Simon going to join us right now on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline.
He's really great. You don't hear me fawn over a lot of people around here. I'm a big admirer of him and his work.
Basically, David Simon and Aaron Rodgers.
Yes, basically that's the list. He obviously created The Wire, and he's now got a new HBO miniseries, Show Me a Hero. It premieres Sunday, August 16th. We'll talk to him about that in a second. I guess I'll start here. It's kind of open-ended. It's probably even unfair, David, but I'm sure you'll take us someplace interesting. You were a police beat reporter for a long time. You know the streets of Baltimore. You're very savvy and smart and eloquent on the subject of race. So what do you make of race relations in this country right now in 2015?
I think certain things are happening that are painful but healthy. Things are now coming to the fore that have been unaddressed for a while. Specifically, the revolution in cell phones, in smartphones and camera phones, has made the dynamic of law enforcement in the black community. It's made it sort of a paramount problem, and it's always been there. But until that recent technological revolution, it was I know from as a police reporter we were dealing with my word against yours. It's just us out on this corner. If there are witnesses, there better be a lot of them. They better be. They better not have criminal histories. They better not be anybody I can intimidate. The manner in which a law enforcement officer, a patrolman on his beat, could be in some respects the last great tyranny, even in a republic, is coming undone because of these cell phones, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's going to be painful, and there's going to be a lot of. There's going to have to be a lot more acknowledgement on the part of white folk about what's been going on, but it's the truth, and it's been there. It's just been part of the policing culture for generations now.
Can you tell us over the last year, 18 months, 2 years, what you, David Simon, have personally found most dispiriting or most painful?
Well, I think whenever I want to get depressed, all I have to do is sort of listen to the public discourse. And the nature of the argument that goes back and forth between people on race, it's almost as if people are talking past each other, as if the terms aren't defined. I'll give you an example. There's an argument going on as to whether or not, in my city, we had the Freddie Gray, the death in the back of the wagon, followed by civil disturbances and anger, rightful anger, and frankly, I'm sorry, you can call it an uprising, but a riot's a riot. And then some disturbances that the optics don't help anybody and don't help anyone's cause. And then we also have, in the wake of that, and we've had a rising murder rate now for 3 or 4 years. So, you ask people what's going on in Baltimore, and there are a lot of people that want to point to the murder rate and the level of violence right now in the inner city, and they want to say Baltimore is being under-policed. The police no longer have the trust of people, and they don't trust the people not to jam them up on a brutality complaint, so they're staying in their cars. They're not clearing the corners. They're not going for guns. And then you have other people saying, "Oh, wait a sec. This is a city where they were locking up 1 in 7 people a few years ago, where until the last change of regime, they were using mass arrest to violate just about everybody's civil rights." Which one of these things is true? Is Baltimore over-policed or under-policed? Is America over-policed or under-policed? And the answer is both. The problem is people are talking past each other. It's over-policed in the sense of the drug war and the level of arrest that we're now putting on these poor communities is astonishing. It's never been seen in the history of the West. There's no country like us in terms of incarcerating our poor. In that sense, it's over-policed, but it's under-policed in the sense of if you're African American or Latino, if you're a person of color, or if you're a person in the inner city, and you're the victim of a murder, your chance of having it solved, of having your life matter with regard to the state responding to it, is less than it's ever been in Baltimore. Our clearance rate for murder right now is 35%. When I was in the homicide unit, it was double that. So when you need the police, and when you need them to do what they're very good at, they've ceased to be effective, and they're not a factor. And when you don't need them, and when they're being completely destructive to inner city neighborhoods, they're doing a lot of that. So it's like you try to get people to talk about what's actually happening, and the racial dynamic is such that everybody wants to be angry over what they think is the problem, but nobody's willing to address all of it.
Well, I was going to say, what's the solution? But that doesn't seem like a fair question to ask you to solve this one, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, if I would start by ending the drug war. I would completely end the drug war. I'm indifferent to the notion of locking people up because of a medical dynamic and because of an economic dynamic in the inner cities that has an entrenched drug culture that cannot be defeated by the power of arrest, and that can only lead to levels of incarceration that are destructive to families, to communities, to human beings. And they don't do anything. If it was draconian and it worked, if you were reducing the levels of drug involvement in any meaningful way, we could have a discussion. But it just doesn't work. All it's doing is destroying the poor. It's a war on the poor.
He is relentlessly interesting. David Simon with us on ESPN Radio. He's the creator of the new HBO miniseries, Show Me a Hero. It premieres Sunday, August 16th.
David, you'd mentioned the drug war, and I'm curious, because of the way America sees drugs, even something like marijuana, which is increasingly legalized, but in comparison to something like alcohol, which is propped up by this enormous industry, is there a rebranding around drugs that needs to take place? How do we change conceptions of Americans to sort of look at drugs in a different way, given how it has been sold to the country for so long?
I have no warm regard for drugs. They, too, are an incredibly destructive force. Certainly narcotics are. But what narcotics in the inner city have not pulled apart, the war against them clearly has. And, I'm looking at using the existing resources of society and arguing that we should use them for harm reduction, that we should not use them to jail people for merely what we don't wish them to do, but rather we should use our jail cells, our police, our courts for that which we cannot allow them to do. And incredibly, we're doing the exact opposite. In Baltimore, it's almost street legal to kill somebody right now. Again, the clearance rate is 35%. That means they arrest people 3.5 times for every, you'd have to say for every, you can't tell how many people would be defendants in each murder, but estimating 35% of the people who kill somebody are arrested, identified and arrested. But actually, once you shake it out in court and find out how many people they're able to convict, it's probably 1 in 10 or 2 in 10. Based on that figure, that means that your chance of getting away if you kill someone in Baltimore is relatively good. On the other hand, we had a guy here who wanted to be governor, mayor here who wanted to be governor, and he thought the way to do it was lock up, in a city of 600,000 people, lock up 114,000 people in a single year, which is just creating it's just drowning the system, and it's creating a revolving culture of arrest. It's also teaching a generation of cops how not to do police work. So, I don't want to rebrand heroin or cocaine. I mean, I don't think that they're doing anybody any good. But yes, alcohol is an incredibly volatile drug, and it does infinitely more damage, certainly than marijuana, and possibly as much damage as the narcotics that have had this war arrayed against them. But white people run those distilleries, and the truth is that this has been a very convenient. The drug war has been a very convenient policy for a war on people of color.
This is troublesome for me because I thought we were interviewing Miles Simon today, so my questions about who will make this year's Final Four make absolutely no sense, so I am out of here.
David Simon with us. He's the creator of the new HBO miniseries, Show Me a Hero, which premieres Sunday, August 16th. Let's do this a little bit. I want to go a little more personal with you. You are thought to have made perhaps the greatest television show ever, a perfect television show. Do you have any creative difficulty, and you're a very creative person, following that, David, given that you came out, and you've written books, but that your first major television vehicle was damn near perfect? Anything after that is going to almost inevitably pale.
I don't have any problem with it. I don't agree with your assessment. I don't think anything's perfect. All writing and all work is just sort of abandoned. At some point, the deadline comes and swallows you, and you move on to the next thing. To be honest with you, while The Wire was about 60 hours of television and we were able to cover a good deal of what we intended, I actually think some of the stories after it were better executed as television and as narrative.
I've read a lot about you, David. This might be an unfair question for you to answer, but are you kind of a misery?
I don't think so.
Okay, because it seems like you suffer some of your creative it seems like you suffer it a little bit.
No, I think I have a reputation for being almost a misanthrope. I like to argue politics. I don't consider the argument to be personally belligerent. I was raised to be a newspaper reporter, which is to say, we argued around my family table. That's how we related on a Good Friday night. Is we all staked out a position and argued to the death, and we enjoyed it. And a lot of this goes back to a particular piece that went to a great effort to string two and two together and come up with a son of a that ran in a magazine a long time ago. But actually, the argument that I'm asking for in the writer's room is not the argument of people who are disrespecting each other or who are misanthropic or angry. It's argument that makes the work better. And I mean, I guess how do I prove that to anybody? I guess I can't. I'm sort of a prisoner of whatever reputation I have. But I keep working with the same people decade after decade, and I've been at HBO for 20 years. If I'm the son of a everyone thinks I am, I've held a lot of people in orbit for a long time.
What do you believe to be a fair criticism of The Wire when you say it's not a perfect TV show? Like, what do you look at and say, if I had to do this over again, I would do this differently?
Well, there was one thing I would have loved to have done, which was, I think it's incomplete. It needs one more season, but the season needed to be not at the end. It wasn't a matter of adding a season. Before seasons 4 and 5, before we had the rise of Marlo Stanfield and that double season arc, it ended season 4 with the bodies all in the vacant row houses, and then it continued on to the end of that arc with Marlo. Somewhere between seasons 3 and 4, I wish that my late friend Dave I wish that he'd come up with the idea of doing an immigration season earlier. He came up with it after we were already in prep. So, I think, in terms of the dynamic of immigration and what that does in terms of class warfare and the way in which people's fears of the other are magnified by politics, that would have been an interesting element to add. The idea of the diminution of labor among new immigrants, and we're seeing that in Baltimore. We have for a long time Baltimore had very little Latino population, but over the last 20 years it's actually expanded significantly, and that would have been something to research and do well, and we missed the window on it.
You're going to want to watch this Sunday, August 16th, the new HBO miniseries, Show Me a Hero. He doesn't do uninteresting work. David, thank you. Hopefully we can talk to you again. It was a pleasure.
Sure.